We're going to be in the book of 1 Chronicles, if you want to turn there. 1 Chronicles chapter 29. We'll land there in just a minute. While you're turning there, I will mention that, so the nature of working with teenagers for a long, long time is that I have a long list of stupid games we've played. Just a long list. And I have to tell you, one of the dumbest things I have ever seen was this game. We went to this conference probably 15 years ago. And they had a morning show activity when you woke up in the morning first thing, and it was supposed to be, we sang dumb songs, and they had comedy. And the game was called, What Will You Do for $5? Now, let me just tell you that when you have a room full of 16 and 17-year-old kids, the answer to the question, what will you do for $5, is just about anything. I'm going to spare you some of the details. If you really want to be grossed out, you can see me afterwards, and I will explain to you what the game Blended is Splendid is, but I'm not going to do that right now because some of you will get nauseous. I will tell you this. One of the games we played was called pantyhose fencing, okay? And the way that works is you put the leg part of the pantyhose on your head like that, and then in the end, you put a raw egg. And the first person to get the egg to break on the other person wins $5. So for $5, you try to smack each other in the head with a raw egg because they're 16, and what will you do for $5? The answer is almost anything. I bring that up because it is an indicator of just how obsessed our culture is with stuff, with accumulating wealth, with accumulating things, with material possessions. To fast forward it to adult land, as of 2015, were you aware that there are more than 46,000 storage units nationwide? Just to give you context, that's 3 times as many as there are McDonald's franchises. For every one McDonald's you drive by, there are 3 storage facilities nearby. In fact, in America, we spend over $10 million every single month storing stuff that we don't have room for in our house. We're all hoarders. We are a nation of people who loves our stuff, and we cling to it like it is the most valuable thing in the world. And what we're going to see in 1 Chronicles chapter 29 is this radical generosity that doesn't necessarily make sense in our world, that is hard for us to wrap our brains around. And we're going to see a model for generosity from David and the people of Israel. Now, those of you who've been reading along with us in the Books of the Bible series, it's going to feel a little bit like we're going backwards. We already did all this David and Solomon stuff. But you may not know that 1 Chronicles is one of, if not the very last book written in your Bible. 1 Chronicles was written after the exile, after they had rebuilt Jerusalem, as a reminder to the people, this is who we are. These are the kind of people we're supposed to be. And so the person who put 1 Chronicles together goes back through the history of Israel and points to these highlight moments and says, we're God's people. This is how we're supposed to act. And one of the stories that he chooses to include is this story in 1 Chronicles 29. Now we're going to pick up reading in verse 6. Before we get there, just a little bit of background. David was this incredible king who had conquered the enemies of Israel, who had built a massive palace for himself, and had come to the end of his life and realized something's wrong here. I live in this beautiful palace with fancy gold thrones and cedar walls, and God still resides in this tent. They were still using the tabernacle they had built in the wilderness. And so David has this strong desire to build a temple for God. And in chapter 22, God comes to David and says, David, you're not building my temple. You have too much blood on your hands. You have hurt too many people. You've killed too many people. I want a man of peace to build my temple. And so your son, Solomon, will get to build the temple. And David decides that if he can't build the temple, at the very least, he can fund the temple. And so David takes a vast amount of his personal wealth and donates it and says, listen, I'm giving all of this money to this project so that when I'm gone, Solomon can build the temple, and I will provide all the gold and all the jewels and all the silver to pay for its construction. And then we pick up in verse 6. David has asked the people of Israel back in verse 5, who will volunteer to consecrate himself to the Lord today? In short, who's going to give with me? This is what happens starting in verse 6. Then the leaders of the households, the leaders of the tribes of Israel, the commanders of thousands and of hundreds, the officials in charge of the king's work gave willingly. For the service of God's house, they gave 185 tons of gold. That's a lot of gold. Yours is probably measured in talents. And 10,000 gold coins, 375 tons of silver, 675 tons of bronze, and 4,000 tons of iron. Whoever had precious stones gave them to the treasury of the Lord's house under the care of Jehiel the Gershonite. Then the people rejoiced because of their leaders' willingness to give, for they had given to the Lord with a whole heart. And King David also rejoiced greatly. This is probably the single largest offering ever collected. I mean, I didn't see what was in the trays today, but I'm betting there's not thousands of pounds of gold in there. I could be wrong. Some of you could surprise me, but my guess is there's not tons of gold. It's always difficult to calculate ancient money into modern money because their value and it's difficult. So when you look up how much this was actually given, you're going to get a wide range of numbers, different people who've done the math differently. The bottom line is this: somewhere between 95 million and $4 billion was put in the offertory that day. That's a pretty good collection day. We don't have enough numbers to put that on our sign back there. Okay? We just put a little B next to it. 4B. The fascinating part of this is how willing and eagerly the people gave. Did you catch that as you were reading through there? That it says that they gave willingly in verse 6. It says that they rejoiced because of their leaders' willingness to give, for they had given to the Lord with a whole heart. These three verses focus on this group of leaders who were so excited to be a part of God's work, who were so excited to be a part of this building of the temple, that they willingly and eagerly and excitedly gave incredibly generous gifts to the work of the Lord. And so on the one hand, we read these first few verses of chapter 29, and we get a glimpse of the heart of these people and just how much their gift should be valued. In verse 10, however, David begins to pray. And when David begins to pray, we get a secondary glimpse, because David's going to shift our perspective from how much these people gave to how much God is really worth. So let's take a look at David's prayer, starting in verse 10 of chapter 29. And I'll point out a few things as we read. Then David praised the Lord in the sight of all the assembly. David said, "May you be praised, Lord God of our father Israel, from eternity to eternity. Yours is the greatness and the power and the glory and the splendor and the majesty, for everything in the heavens and on earth belongs to you. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom, and you are exalted as head over all. Riches and honor come from you. You are the ruler of everything. Power and might are in your hand, and it is in your hand to make great and to give all strength. Now, therefore, God, we give you thanks and praise your glorious name." Here's David's first thing that he recognizes in his prayer. God, we brought you tons of gold. We brought you tons of silver, literally tons. We brought you piles of precious jewels, but the reality is we didn't bring anything that didn't already belong to you. For everything in heaven and on earth is yours. Yours is the power. Yours is the glory. Yours is the splendor. It's all yours anyway. All we did was bring what already belonged to you. You get a glimpse of this if you've had a young child in your house recently. The conversation goes something like this. You get like a 12-year-old who looks at their mother and says, "You can't take that. That's my phone." And then the mother, either kindly or not so kindly, depending on how tense the conversation has been, says something along the lines of, "Oh, your phone? Really? Did you buy it? Do you pay the bill? When it breaks, who's going to replace it? It's your phone, really? Because I'm pretty sure it's my phone that I'm just letting you use for a little bit." And then the teenager slams the door and goes in the room, because that's what they do. That's how the conversation goes. If you've ever had a teen in your life, you've had that exact conversation. Maybe about a phone, maybe about a car, but this idea of possession. You give something to a child, and they, "Oh, that's my toy. That's my room. That's my phone. That's my car." But you as the parent know, no. It's my house. I let you live here. And someday, I may choose to stop letting you live here. It's amazing how many of us, when it comes to being generous and to giving, we're like rebellious 12-year-olds. "Here, God, you can have this much of my money. God, I can give you this much of my time. God, I'm willing to offer you this I worked so hard for this paycheck, and I'm gonna so generously give you this much of it." As if it didn't all belong to Him in the first place. As if everything we have wasn't already His. As if the fact that we are breathing and living and moving, the fact that we have jobs and bank accounts and health and skills wasn't all a gift from Him in the first place, and all we're doing is using what He gave us. And so part of the reason David and his leaders can come and give so generously to the work of God is because they recognize that it's not theirs anyway. It all belongs to Him. All they're doing is using His resources for His glory in the best way they know how. And David understands that. Picking up in verse 14, he says, "But who am I? And who are my people, that we should be able to give as generously as this? For everything comes from you. We have given you only what comes from your hand. For we live before you as foreigners and temporary residents in your presence, as were all our ancestors. Our days on earth are like a shadow without hope. Yahweh, our God, all this wealth that we provided for building you a house for your holy name comes from your hand. Everything belongs to you." I love the way he starts that passage. "But who am I, and who are my people, that we should be able to give as generously as this?" That's not the modern view of giving, right? When you buy someone a nice gift, the person who receives it is supposed to say, "Thank you. You're so kind. Thank you for thinking of me. Just my size." And David here says, "God, we were able to give. Thank you for that privilege. We are not worthy to be a part of what you're doing here. Who are we that we should be able to build a temple for God? Who are we that we should be able to participate in the work of the kingdom? Who are we to have this privilege? God, thank you for letting us give." It's a perspective shift that's happened for me a couple of times in my life, probably because I can be a little arrogant at times. Don't say anything, it's not nice. I'm aware. Usually with my time, not with my money. I've been around Round Lake long enough that I could probably literally spend every single week of the summer. Someone invites me to do something every single week of the summer. And so there's this little math thing that goes on in your head. Okay, so they want me to preach 5 times. That's going to be like 50 hours of prep work, and then I'm going to miss 5 nights away from my family. Is it worth it for me to go do this thing that they've asked me to do? They want me to be in charge of this weekend retreat. Well, that's 60 hours of planning, and it's 3 days away, and I've got to find somebody to cover Sunday in the morning. And so you're doing this math in your mind. How much am I willing to give for this thing? And if you're not careful, it can turn into this like, aren't they so lucky to have me? I gave them 50 hours of my life. Aren't they so lucky that I was willing to do that? I gave them 5 nights away from my house. Aren't they so privileged? Isn't it a joy to have me in your life? Don't answer that. I see the wheels turning. And there are these moments when I get a little too much on my high horse where God will flip the script on me. And I'll be in the midst of preaching this sermon or working this week at camp. And I will realize in that moment that God is doing something special. And I find myself sitting down and going, who am I that God lets me be a part of this? Who am I that God lets me speak His truth into the lives of 12 and 13-year-olds? Who am I that God allows me to serve and be a part of His plan? Who am I? I'm a nobody. I'm just a guy who thinks too highly of himself and yells really loudly for 20 minutes every Sunday. Who am I? And part of the reason David and his leaders are willing and able to be so generous is they don't only recognize that all of this stuff belongs to God in the first place, they also recognize that they are being asked to be a part of the work of God, and they don't deserve that privilege, but it is a privilege to be a part of the work of God. And sometimes we get in this idea that giving is an obligation or a duty that we must perform. Almost every Sunday, I'll come up here and I pray for our offering, and I will say something like this: God, don't let this be a duty, let it be an act of worship. And I know it's repetitive, but I say it because I need to remind myself that God is not privileged to receive my gift. I am privileged to give it. God is not privileged because Josh Robinson thinks it's good to give my time and money to him. I am privileged because God considers my gifts worthy to use for His glory. And we need to be reminded that when we give, what an honor it is to be a part of the work God is doing. Keep reading David's prayer. We'll pick up here in verse 17. He says, I know, my God, that you test the heart, and that you are pleased with what is right. I have willingly given all these things with an upright heart. And now I have seen your people who are present here giving joyfully and willingly to you. Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, our ancestors, keep this desire forever in the thoughts of the hearts of your people and confirm their hearts toward you. Give my son Solomon a whole heart to keep and carry out all your commands, your decrees, and your statutes, and to build the temple for which I have made provision. Then David said to the whole assembly, praise the Lord your God. So the whole assembly praised the Lord of their ancestors. They bowed down and paid homage to the Lord and the king. The last thing David understands is that giving is always an issue of the heart. It's not about a financial gift. It's not about the amount that is given. It is about the attitude and the willingness and the desire of the heart. And David confirms in his prayer, I have given with a pure and upright heart. And then he prays for his son Solomon and for the future of his kingdom. God, keep in them this same upright and pure heart, that they may continue to serve and give to your kingdom and your glory. It's always an issue of the heart. You know, our leadership is reading this book by Tony Morgan, and he points out something kind of interesting in the book that I'd never really thought of. Jesus connects money in the heart in his teaching. He says that where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. You've heard that thousands of times. And he points out that, and he's right, that's not how most of us think about it. Most of us think about it the other way. Where my heart is, there my treasure will be. If I love this thing, then I'll give money to it. If I love the church, I'll give money to the church. If I love my school, I'll give money to the school. If I love the Boy Scouts, I'll give money to the Boy Scouts. If I love Josh, I'll leave him a nice gift after service. No hints. I'm just saying hypothetically. Just throwing that out there. Jesus doesn't say that. He doesn't say where your heart is, your treasure will follow. He says where your treasure is, your heart will follow. And surprisingly, it's going to shock you, Jesus was right. He knew what he was talking about. Because the same thing happens. Not a single person in this room would care if, let's say, Pepsi suddenly bombed their latest release and lost $500 million, $500 billion overnight. None of you would care unless you had money in Pepsi stock. And then all of a sudden now, because your money is there, your heart is there also. When you invest in something, when you put your money towards something, it suddenly means something to you. We got a glimpse of this doing ministry through the years. I used to work really hard to make things free for kids. You can't afford to come to the all-nighter, I'll pay for it. You can't afford to come to camp, I'll pay for it. And I learned that you were better off saying, you can't afford to come, can you bring $3? Because if it was free, they may or may not show up. They may say they're going to come and bail at the last minute. They don't really care if they don't get to come. But if they've paid me even, first of all, every teenager in the world can come up with $3. They'll bum it off of somebody. And two, the moment they put money into it, they're invested. Because where your treasure is, there your heart is. A glimpse of this, I had a friend named Mike in high school. Mike and I played football together. And Mike spent his last 2 years of high school, junior and senior years, fully restoring a 1968 Barracuda. It was beautiful. This muscle car, man, it was gorgeous. He had a white racing stripe down the middle, but it looked just about like that. It was a gorgeous car. And because teenage boys are stupid, we would come out from football practice, and guys, especially before school started because there were no administration around, guys would be like spinning out and laying rubber down in the parking lot, whose car can be the loudest, so you got all these little pickup trucks and stuff. And day after day, they'd look at Mike and they'd go, spin your wheels, spin your wheels. And after about a week of this, Mike looked at one of my other buddies. He goes, listen, your daddy bought your car, your daddy put tires on your car, and you don't care. I spent $8,000 fixing up this car, and those tires cost me $1,200. I'm not leaving $100 of rubber laying in the school parking lot. Leave me alone. Because when there's money involved, it means something different. And David understood that this issue of their generosity and the attitude of their hearts, they were always connected. You can't separate the two. There's one particular scholar who puts it this way. He says, when we spend our money, we used to have it. When we save our money, we never enjoy it. But when we give our money away, we watch it work forever. When we give our money away, we watch it work forever. Listen, this is not one of those sermons where we're not going to pass the offering trays again after I beg you for money, okay? It's not one of those sermons. If I'm being honest, I am repeatedly humbled by the generosity of this church. This is just a sermon I'm preaching because it's what the text says. I didn't say, yeah, we haven't talked about offering. I had to really talk about money for a while. It's what the text is about. So this is not one of those where I come and tell you, listen, we got to give more. We can't. It's not like that. God has blessed us. But I'm just telling you, for your personal spiritual well-being, for you as a follower of Christ, until you learn to be generous, whether it's with this church, it's with other people, it's with other missions, it's with other ministries, until you learn to be generous, your heart will never be in the right place because your heart will follow your money. And so if your money is in your house or your possessions or yourself, then your heart is going to be with your house and your possessions and yourself. And you're going to spend thousands of dollars every year for a storage unit that you don't even use. Stuff that you haven't looked at in 20 years. It's like an entire economy built on these people who go buy stuff that's been locked in storage units for 25 years and no one's opened it in 3 decades. And they buy it at auction and then they resell it so that somebody else can put it in a storage unit. And if your money is in those things, then your heart is going to be in those things. But when you come like David did, and you recognize that everything you have is a gift of God's anyway, it all belongs to Him. It's His stuff. And you recognize that you're not really worthy to give to Him, and yet He takes whatever you bring and uses it for His glory anyway. And then you recognize that when I give, my heart is transformed. I'm just telling you that you, as a follower of Christ, will never be who God wants you to be until you learn to be generous, until you learn to give faithfully to His work, until you learn to give generously to those around you, until you love people more than you love your stuff. Your heart will never be in the right place. And so I just want to encourage you, this model from David's prayer, to give with your heart in full recognition of the glory of God and what a privilege it is to be a part of His work. So we're going to stand and sing the song, I Surrender All. May that be a prayer for us this morning. Why don't you join me as we sing?